All-Americans, all-conference, guys that are playing in the NFL to this day. And it was just one of those deals where we were kind of, in a different realm that we had been in, and it was where our success really started to come after, 6 or so years of coaching and kind of climbing throughout the ranks. We were in a position where, we were able to celebrate a little bit and enjoy that part of everything. So,
yeah, I remember obviously I've kind of followed, everywhere you've been and following those West Georgia teams. It just seemed like you guys kept growing and kept winning more and getting closer and closer. And, with comes success, comes, moving on to the next step. And,
for sure.
I feel like it's always tough to leave any job, especially when, you're as much of a family guy as you are.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know that you and your wife take all these moves and, sit down and say, hey, what's best for us? What's
sure.
best for the kids? What's
Mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy.
Yeah. So, it's not like, you're just here bouncing all over the country, and doing it on your own.
Yeah.
I'm glad you keep bringing up that support system that you have at home. So then you got the opportunity after 3 years at West Georgia to move on to the Incarnate Word.
Mm-hmm.
You were there for a year as the safeties and recruiting coordinator, and then that brings you to Liberty, where you are currently. So how did the opportunity from moving on from Incarnate Word to Liberty, where did that opportunity come about?
Well, kind of just what you were saying as far as moving throughout and going throughout. We've been fortunate, we've been blessed, man. God has put us in a situation where we've been able to grow the young men that we've been a part of their lives, help hopefully grow the programs we've been a part of, and just in turn continue to move forward. And so the relationship that I made with Scott at the University of West Georgia has really kind of blossomed us to where we're at Liberty, because he, again, like I said, is a defensive coordinator. And, I got a call almost a year ago to the day, him talking about him possibly taking the job at Liberty and saying, I want you to be a part of this program. There's a couple of different conversations that were going on as far as what capacity that could be in. There was things that we had to weigh as far as from a family aspect of, is that the right move for us? Especially, we were part of history at UIW as well, winning conference and
mm-hmm.
being the first team to do that, and then to take them to the playoffs. And so, we prayed about it like we do everything. And this move, though, was the first time I sat down with my wife, my son, and my daughter. Cameron's not old enough to understand,
mm-hmm.
but Reagan, and I said, all right, if we do this, then we're all doing this. It's not just mom and dad talking to you about doing it. It's all of us making a decision. And it was kind of like, yes, yes, yes,
mm-hmm.
before we made that decision. And then, we prayed on it, and, just felt like it was a really good move. And so to see the season unfold the way that it did this year, to see us to have the success that we did, it just feels like dream come true, blessing come true type of situation. So.
Yeah, and they just recently transitioned, up
mm-hmm.
to the, Division I level, and you guys won the first bowl game in school history. So it was a historic season.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
So congratulations on that. And how was the transition? And when, you're working for a legend, Hugh Freeze. There was a lot of news about he was battling some sickness, toward the beginning of the year. And, so I'm sure that took a lot of trust in him to you assistant coaches, especially probably his right-hand man, to make sure the day-to-day and things were going. So just talk a little bit about, I guess, from a year ago, when everything came down and you decided, like, hey, this is what we're doing, we're going. What was kind of the first steps, and then working for Hugh Freeze and all those things?
Well, always with transition, it's usually I'll have to leave before they do. And so,
mm-hmm.
I think I had just got them down to San Antonio in July because we were pregnant with Cameron. And so my wife stayed to make sure that, we weren't trying to go back and forth as far as doctors. And it's important to me that my kids finish school wherever they are. Tay's pretty good athlete, so he enjoys rec baseball and his travel baseball team. And so before I could just pull them away from everything, I got there and kind of laid a foundation in San Antonio. They get there in July, and then I'm telling them in January that we're going to probably be moving again. That was difficult, but not, because like I said, everybody had said yes, and they felt like it was good for our family. And so we get there in March, get them there in March. But prior to that, we had to hit the ground running from a recruiting standpoint. When I talked to Coach Freeze for the first time, he was, I don't know how this is going to go, but these are the things that I'm looking for. First and foremost, a man of God. Second of all, a man that's going to impact the guys that he's coaching. And then third, the best coach that we can have. But those other two come before who you are as a coach. And so when you hear that, you're like, for me, that's important. That's falls in line with who I am and what I'm about. And so I said, well, Coach, you don't have to worry about that. You just, trust me, trust Scott, that when we get there, we're going to make it happen. And so he did end up hiring me, obviously, and we got there, and we got 2 weeks to sign the rest of our signing class. I think they signed 5 or so in the early period last year. And so, we could sign up to 25 a year, depending on the number of signatures and scholarships that we have. And so, I got there for probably 2 days, and then I was in Atlanta, and then I was in Richmond, and then I was in Dallas, and then just all over the place, because you think of some of the guys that you've been recruiting that maybe at the FCS level you're trying to snag a higher level guy. So those guys now come into play from your FBS standpoint, and then who are guys that didn't get signed in that first period that you can go get. So we did a really good job signing the best recruiting class that they had there, and we had basically 2 weeks to do it. Fast forward us to spring ball. It's implementing our defense with guys who have no idea what we expect, not the guys that you technically or have recruited there, trying to get them up to speed offensively and defensively. And so the cover wasn't bare there by any stretch of the imagination. We have a quarterback, Buckshot Calvert. We had a receiver in Antonio Gandy Golden that, those two alone were huge pieces of what we do offensively. Defensively, in my room in particular, we had a young man that was coming back, Bajor Wilson. That was a All-American type kid that I leaned heavily upon in his first year. And then outside of that, we had guys that had either not played or that were freshmen that came in. And so, a lot of our youth was able to get some experience this year, throughout the season. At one point in time, I think it was New Mexico State. We played them the first time. We had like 6 freshmen on the field on defense, not period, on defense. And to see them just mature, for them to grow, for them to perform the way that they did against Georgia Southern, who I think everybody knows they didn't know. No one gave us a chance to win that game, which we kept in our pocket a little bit. If anything, Coach Freeze he's a competitor for sure. So he continued to remind us about that. But to see us grow as a team, as a staff, to learn him, what he's about, to go through with him the illness that he experienced at the beginning of the year. Man, it felt like 3 years in one type of deal. So when we won on the 21st, everybody celebrated and was excited, but it was just, it felt like you went through so much. And our goal was tougher together. That was our kind of mantra throughout the season, and I think it was very fitting for sure.
Yeah, that's an excellent deal. And how was it, when you guys first come in as a new staff, and you have these guys that you didn't sign that were already there, and there's always going to be some guys that are like, I'm out. New coaches. If I can get new coaches, I'm gonna go somewhere else. But how did you guys kind of say, hey, we got to keep some of these core guys around? We don't want to start completely from scratch. Like you said, the cover wasn't bare. Let's make sure there's certain key guys we got to keep. How was that process?
I think a part of that is who your head coach is. And it's not just saying it to say it. It's just what it's about. His main goal in meeting one is to capture the hearts and the minds of the young men that we are coaching. Because no matter what our scheme is, no matter what we're trying to do, offensively or defensively, if we capture them in that way that has nothing to do with football, like I do, and you guys know, as being sports minds and guys that are around sports, when you get guys that believe in you and believe in what you're talking to them about, it don't matter what you're talking about. It's that belief, that triumphs, that supersedes all of those other things. So when we were able to do that, especially with the guys that have been successful there. Like I said, the 2 on offense, more than 2, but those guys, the defensive end, Jesse Lemonnier, and Solo, our linebacker. When those guys feel it, now they're leaders on the team. So now they're digesting what you say, and then they're giving it to the team as well. And I feel like we just kind of were able to do it now. That doesn't mean we didn't have bumps. It doesn't mean we have guys that say this is not for me, or we're going to move on, or any of those things. But the nucleus and the guys that we felt like we were counting on really bought into what we were talking about. And it was also being blessed for them to trust us, because they had to do that as well. It wasn't just, all right, this is what we're going to do now. You either get with it or get gone. They had to trust us, and so when we were able to do that, we felt like we could be special and have a chance. I mean, Coach said in his introduction interview that we're going to win a bowl game, and I'm sure everybody that was sitting there was like, man, that sounds good.
Yeah.
They're excited about it and all of those things. Now, the program had been, like I said, they had done well at the FCS ranks and before. But to hear him say that, I'm sure there was a lot of naysayers and doubters. And for it to come to pass, it was a big deal.
Yeah, that's so key, getting those guys. Because especially, with the way transfer is now, transfer portal, and to get that nucleus, but it sounds like Coach Freeze is of the like mind as you are, and how I've came up is, we're building men.
For sure.
We just happen to be doing it through football.
For sure.
X's and O's are important. You got to know those, but I feel like most of the coaches I've worked around know the X's and O's part, but there's certain guys that are better with the athletes, with the kids, and really reaching them than others, and I feel like that's where you make your difference.
Yeah. Well, it's just like with the athletes, you can teach them the X's and O's. If you're a coach, like you said, hopefully at some level you have a basis of X's and O's and game plan and schematics that you're going to implement with your offense or defense. But if you can't relate and you don't have a relationship with the guys that you're coaching, with the men that you're trying to grow, it don't matter what you're going to teach them, from that standpoint. If you can, then you could tell them red is blue and blue is red, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're going to pretty much believe it because they believe in you. So.
Yeah. Because, any offensive formation, you want to draw up, I'm sure you could get on the board and draw it against a 4-3, against a 4-4, against 3-4, all those things. They matter at the end of the day, but like you said, it's really just getting those kids to believe in you, and then it don't matter what you're selling, because they're going to buy it.
They're in doubt. There's no doubt about it, and those are the ones that are successful. Those are the teams that are successful, and it takes ownership for the players as well. You always hear the best teams are player-led teams, not just the ones that are going to listen to what coaches say, but the guys that are going to stand up in some challenging times and say, hey, man, I know you guys might not like what I'm going to say, but this is what we need to do as players. This is what we need to do as men outside of the program. We don't need to be out all times of the night. We don't need to be doing this, that, or the other that's going to cause problems or cause issues. This is how we need to reel it in, dial it in, and get ready to go. So.
Yeah, and I retweeted something the other day. I think it was during the LSU bowl game that the cameras caught, them because it was getting a little snippy, and it
the
caught
rush-in kid.
Yeah. And he called his teammates over and was like, "Hey, we're not doing that. They might be doing it because they're frustrated or they're doing whatever." And I retweeted that always means so much more coming from that guy than any coach on the staff, whether it's Ed Orgeron, or not. Any other coach, doesn't matter. It means so much more coming from that guy because that's their peer.
No, I agree. That's a great example because I saw the exact same clip. And, man, it makes me think about something my dad would tell me growing up because I'm the oldest of my brothers. And he would say, man, what you do and what you say is almost more important than what I do and say. And I'm like, how's that? You my dad. You're our dad. You know what I mean? He said, but you're right there, not too far in age from them. They hear about what dad did and could do and who he was and all of those things, but they see you actually doing it. So it's a different, it hits different than it does with him just saying it, because now it's your parents saying you better, or you should, or you have to, as opposed to your brother, your sibling, your friend, your peer saying, hey, you should, and this is why. So,
And I mean, speaking of that, we talked about your youngest or your younger brother Brandon.